In the shadowed corridors of the Forbidden City at the turn of the 20th century, a dynasty that had commanded the loyalty of 400 million souls stood eerily still, its golden roofs gleaming under a sky heavy with unspoken dread. The last emperors of the Qing clung to rituals older than memory itself, while beyond the palace walls the vast empire of China stretched from the frozen steppes of Manchuria to the humid rice fields of the south, a civilization that had once invented the compass, paper, and gunpowder now trembling on the edge of irreversible rupture. Foreign warships prowled the Pearl River and the Yangtze, their guns silent but their presence a constant reminder that the Middle Kingdom was no longer alone at the center of the world. The air carried the faint scent of opium smoke drifting from hidden dens and the distant rumble of cartwheels over cobblestone streets where merchants once traded silk and porcelain without question. This was China before the Communist Revolution, a land where the mandate of heaven had governed for millennia, yet cracks were already spiderwebbing through the ancient stone. No one in the imperial court or the peasant villages yet grasped the scale of what was approaching, but the collapse did not begin with chaos. It began quietly, in the slow erosion of a system that had defined human order for centuries. The Dragon Throne, symbol of divine authority, was about to lose its grip, and the world would never be the same. The immense scale of late Qing China defied imagination, a realm where emperors ruled from Beijing's labyrinthine palaces, while governors in distant provinces enforced Confucian harmony through edicts carried by horse and foot. Mountains rose like silent guardians over terraced fields, rivers swelled with the lifeblood of trade, and cities such as Canton and Shanghai pulsed with the energy of millions who believed their way of life eternal. Yet this grandeur masked a fragility born of isolation. The empire had turned inward for too long while Europe and Japan industrialized with ruthless speed. The scent of jasmine tea mingled with the metallic tang of new foreign rifles smuggled into port cities, and the sound of temple gongs still rang out at dawn, but now it competed with the low whistle of steamships docking at treaty ports. Daily routines continued unbroken on the surface. Scholars studied the classics in candlelit academies, farmers bowed to the land as their ancestors had done, and families gathered around hearths to honor the spirits of the departed. The collapse did not announce itself with fanfare. It whispered through unequal treaties signed under duress, through silver draining away to pay indemnities, through the quiet realization among a few that the celestial empire was no longer invincible. But no one understood what was coming next, for the warning signs remained invisible to those who had known only the old order. Life in the Chinese countryside before the great unraveling followed the ancient rhythm of seasons and duty, where 90% of the population toiled as peasants under landlords who claimed a share of every harvest. Villages nestled among bamboo groves echoed with the steady scrape of sickles at harvest time, the lowing of water buffalo pulling plows through flooded paddies, and the laughter of barefoot children chasing one another along dirt paths lined with mulberry trees. In the evenings, families shared simple meals of congee and pickled vegetables by the light of oil lamps, reciting poems or listening to elders recount tales of imperial glory. Urban centers offered a different rhythm. In Shanghai's international settlement, the clatter of rickshaws mixed with the chatter of foreign businessmen in linen suits, while Chinese laborers hauled crates along the Bund under the gaze of neoclassical banks. Women in silk cheongsams moved gracefully through tea houses, yet behind closed doors many still bound their daughters' feet in the old custom. Confucian values held sway, demanding filial piety and loyalty to the emperor, creating an illusion of unbreakable social fabric. The air smelled of incense and street food, of rain-soaked earth after monsoons, but beneath this serene surface lay the weight of overpopulation and land scarcity that strained every village. The collapse did not begin with chaos. It began quietly in the growing gap between the rich and the landless, in the silent hunger that no edict from Beijing could fill. Early invisible warning signs emerged like cracks in porcelain too delicate to notice at first glance, beginning with the Opium Wars that forced open China's doors at gunpoint in the 1840s. British merchants flooded the empire with opium, turning once proud officials into addicts and draining the treasury of silver until the imperial court could no longer pretend sovereignty remained intact. The Taiping Rebellion soon followed in the 1850s, a cataclysmic uprising led by a man claiming to be the brother of Jesus Christ, slaughtering millions and laying waste to entire provinces in the name of a twisted heavenly kingdom. Armies clashed across the Yangtze Valley, villages burned, and the once fertile lands turned to wasteland, where silence replaced the songs of farmers. Yet the Qing survived, battered and humiliated, signing more treaties that carved out foreign concessions in coastal cities. The scent of gunpowder lingered long after battles ended, and the sound of marching feet echoed in the memories of survivors who wondered why heaven had withdrawn its mandate. These were not yet seen as the death knell of empire. They were dismissed as temporary storms. But no one understood what was coming next, for each concession weakened the center further. Each rebellion exposed the fragility of a system built on ritual rather than resilience. The collapse did not begin with chaos. It began quietly, in the slow poisoning of confidence that no emperor could restore. Rising tension and instability gathered momentum as the 19th century closed, fueled by the Sino-Japanese War of 1894 that exposed China's military obsolescence when tiny Japan seized Taiwan and Korea with shocking ease. The Empress Dowager Cixi, wielding power from behind the throne, oscillated between reform and reaction, her court paralyzed by factional intrigue, while foreign powers carved spheres of influence across the empire. In the north, drought and famine stalked the land, turning proud peasants into desperate migrants who roamed the roads with hollow eyes and empty bowls. The air grew thick with rumors carried on the wind of secret societies plotting against the foreigners and the Manchu rulers alike. Cities like Beijing buzzed with nervous energy as students debated Western ideas in hidden salons, their voices low but urgent. The collapse did not announce itself with fanfare. It crept forward in the form of railway concessions granted to outsiders and the sight of Chinese workers building lines that would carry foreign goods deeper into the heartland. Fear replaced harmony in many hearts, yet daily life persisted in its fragile rhythm, masking the gathering storm. By the time the signs became clear, it was already too late for the old order to adapt without shattering completely. Key decisions and mistakes sealed the fate of Imperial China as the 20th century dawned, none more fateful than the Qing court's stubborn resistance to genuine modernization while half-heartedly launching the self-strengthening movement. Arsenals and shipyards rose under foreign engineers, yet corruption and conservative backlash ensured they remained pale imitations of Western power. Cixi's support for the Boxer Rebellion in 1900 unleashed a wave of anti-foreign violence that ended in utter defeat, with 8 allied armies marching into Beijing and imposing crippling indemnities that bankrupted the treasury for generations. The empress fled in disguise, her court in disarray, while the Forbidden City echoed with the footsteps of foreign soldiers. These choices, born of pride and fear, accelerated the erosion of central authority as provincial governors grew bolder and secret revolutionary societies spread pamphlets calling for an end to Manchu rule. The sound of printing presses in Shanghai and the whispers in tea houses grew louder, carrying ideas of republic and democracy that challenged everything the empire represented. Pressure mounted from within and without, from starving peasants to ambitious warlords, from intellectuals returning from Japan to merchants tired of foreign tariffs. The collapse did not begin with chaos. It began quietly, in the miscalculations of those who believed tradition alone could withstand the modern world. The moment the system began to fail arrived with shocking suddenness in October 1911, when a single accidental bomb explosion in Wuhan ignited the Xinhai Revolution, toppling the Qing Dynasty after 268 years. Soldiers mutinied, provinces declared independence one by one, and the boy Emperor Puyi abdicated in a quiet ceremony that few outside the palace witnessed. Sun Yat-sen, the revolutionary leader returning from exile, proclaimed the Republic of China amid cheers in Nanjing, yet the new government inherited a fractured land where warlords quickly filled the vacuum left by imperial collapse. Beijing's streets filled with the tramp of marching troops loyal to no central authority, while in the countryside bandits roamed freely and tax collectors demanded more than the land could yield. The air tasted of dust and uncertainty as old banners were torn down and new flags of 5 colors fluttered uncertainly. This was the pivot point where centuries of continuity snapped, yet the full horror of what followed remained hidden. No one understood what was coming next, for the revolution that promised renewal instead delivered fragmentation, setting the stage for decades of chaos that would make the communist path seem inevitable to millions. Human consequences and social breakdown unfolded across the warlord era of the 1920s, when China splintered into rival fiefdoms ruled by generals whose armies lived off the land like locusts. Villages that once knew only seasonal hardship now endured forced conscription, arbitrary executions, and the constant threat of marauding soldiers who stripped fields bare before harvest. Mothers hid their sons in mountain caves, fathers watched granaries emptied at gunpoint, and the silence of starvation settled over once vibrant hamlets, where only the wind moved through empty doorways. In cities, inflation soared as worthless paper money replaced stable silver, turning shopkeepers into paupers overnight, while foreign concessions remained islands of relative order. The scent of decay rose from unburied corpses along roadsides, and the sound of distant artillery became a grim lullaby for children who had never known peace. Intellectuals in Beijing and Shanghai marched in the May 4th movement of 1919, demanding science and democracy, yet their voices were drowned by the roar of warlord cannons. Families fractured as husbands left for uncertain work in factories or armies, leaving wives and elders to fend alone. The collapse did not begin with chaos. It began quietly, but now chaos consumed everything, eroding the last threads of Confucian order that had bound society for millennia. Long-term historical impact of this pre-revolutionary collapse extended far beyond the fall of any single dynasty, reshaping the very soul of China and paving the way for the communist victory that would redefine the 20th century. The warlord fragmentation and subsequent nationalist unification under Chiang Kai-shek in 1928 created a fragile republic plagued by corruption and inequality, where landlords still claimed half the harvest while peasants whispered of land reform. Japanese invasion in 1937 turned the conflict into a brutal 8-year war that killed millions and devastated cities like Nanjing, leaving scars visible in ruined temples and mass graves. The Kuomintang's inability to curb hyperinflation or address rural poverty after 1945 handed the moral high ground to Mao Zedong's communists, who promised equality and an end to foreign humiliation. By the time civil war resumed in earnest, the old China had already died in the hearts of the people, replaced by a yearning for radical change born from decades of suffering. The collapse did not announce itself with fanfare. It had been building since the Opium Wars, a slow unraveling that made the communist revolution not a sudden rupture, but the inevitable conclusion of a civilization pushed beyond endurance. Its echoes would resonate through land reform campaigns, the Great Leap Forward, and the Cultural Revolution, forever altering how 1/4 of humanity understood power, loyalty, and the price of renewal. Yet even as the old order crumbled, faint glimmers of continuity persisted in remote villages where elders still taught the classics by firelight and families buried their dead according to ancient rites, refusing to let the past vanish entirely. The reflective weight of this era lies in its haunting lesson. Civilizations that appear eternal can dissolve when they fail to adapt, when pride blinds leaders to the suffering of the governed, when foreign pressure meets internal decay. China before the Communist Revolution was not merely a historical chapter but a mirror to any society facing invisible fractures beneath the surface of tradition and routine. The rivers still flowed, the mountains still stood, but the human landscape had been forever altered by the choices and mistakes of those who believed the mandate of heaven was unbreakable. The silence that followed the last imperial edict carried forward into the new era, a quiet reminder that no empire, no matter how ancient or magnificent, escapes the consequences of its blindness. In the end, the collapse reshaped not only China, but the global balance of power, proving that moments of irreversible rupture leave legacies that outlive the ruins they create. The final images of this pre-revolutionary world linger like ghosts in the collective memory. Starving refugees trudging along dusty roads toward uncertain futures, intellectuals debating in smoke-filled rooms while war raged outside, and the distant sound of revolutionary songs rising from hidden bases in the Yan'an Hills. What had begun as quiet warnings in the 19th century had become a torrent by the 1940s, sweeping away landlords, warlords, and emperors alike in a tide no one could stem. The human cost was measured not only in millions of lives lost to famine, war, and execution, but in the profound rupture of identity itself, as a people who once measured time by dynasties now faced a future defined by ideology and collective will. The collapse did not begin with chaos. It began quietly, yet its ending was written in the exhausted faces of soldiers and peasants who chose one vision of renewal over another. China stood at the threshold, the old world already gone, the new one waiting to be born from the ashes of everything that had come before. This was the true cost of the rupture, a haunting inheritance that would echo through every subsequent chapter of Chinese history. In the end, the story of China before the Communist Revolution is one of profound transformation forged in suffering and miscalculation, where ancient civilization confronted modernity and found its foundations insufficient. The rivers that once nourished empires now carried the debris of fallen regimes, the fields that fed millions now bore witness to mass graves, and the palaces that symbolized divine rule stood empty, their halls echoing with the footsteps of new masters. No one understood what was coming next when the first opium clippers arrived, yet those ships heralded a century of upheaval that would culminate in the victory of 1949. The reflective power of this era lies in its warning. Empires fall not from sudden catastrophe alone, but from the accumulated weight of ignored warnings, failed reforms, and the quiet despair of those who bear the heaviest burdens. As the last warlord banners were lowered, and the final imperial edicts faded into history, a new chapter opened, born from the very collapse that had seemed impossible to those who once walked the streets of Beijing under the dragon flag. The silence that settled over the land was not peace, but the pause before an entirely different kind of order asserted itself, forever changing the destiny of the world's oldest continuous civilization.